clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Peck.
Here.
Commissioner Angel.
Here.
Commissioner Arbkey.
Here.
Commissioner Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Will you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
This time we'll open the meeting up for the Citizens Open Forum, which is a time for any citizen to come forward and discuss something that is not on today's agenda, if they so choose. Doesn't look like anyone is here for that today, so we'll move on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing on petition number 4329, requesting the vacation of an easement in the Lakewood Addition replat.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This item was continued at your August 23rd meeting, and that was at the request of the petitioner, Mr. Mark Augustine, who owns Citywide Self-Storage. And some time back, he was receiving mixed signals from the folks at the Westar Transmission Group in Topeka about how they felt about the transmission line easement going through that property. So the purpose of continuing this to today's meeting was to allow him additional time to have discussions with them. Their result of that was a letter received from Westar that indicated they don't support a vacation of any part or portion of this easement, nor does the city's utility department that also has a sewer there. So given that information, the best course of action was to withdraw the petition, and so no further action is needed at this time.
Is the term withdraw or vacation, either one, more appropriate on this, or does it matter?
Well, if we treat it as withdrawn, then no formal vote is needed on the petition because they've voluntarily taken it back.
Okay, so we don't need to even...
You can just close the public hearing and move on.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I will close the public hearing. We'll move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of September 13th, 2010. Item 6.2, submit a letter stating that the city does not oppose the establishment of an Army or Air Force exchange service store.
Is there any particular item on the consent agenda the Commissioner would like to see removed?
Can I just ask a question regarding the regarding that store? Is this it's not going to have any non-perishables? Is it just clothing? Well, it says clothing and supplies, so the supplies is what got me.
Yeah, I may defer to Jared. That's my understanding, is it's clothing and supplies, but...
I'm going to tap into a little bit of my history, and generally it's a BX is my understanding, and they do have some perishables, but it's generally limited. It's not
Okay,
a
and
basic change of
that's
being-
why I asked. I mean, because they sell liquor, cigarettes,
Right.
food,
Yes.
and then clothing, and
They have Gatorade, sports, nutrition supplements. In my experience, they've had those type of items. From the information I reviewed, they didn't detail exactly what the exchange was going to carry, but in my experience, they've had those type of items. It's different than a commissary, which would carry more of your fruits, vegetables, and other breads, etc. So, but I'll defer. There may be more information from the chamber on that issue, but I'm not aware of them asking for a commissary to be put in.
Dennis Lover from the Chamber of Commerce, and I agree with Jared's recollection and description of what the store is.
okay. That was all. That was my only question. Thank you.
Accept a motion to approve the... Oh, sure. Sure.
Just not in regard to what Mr. Johnson said. A little bit over a year ago, General Norman Steen approached us and answered the question, how can we help the military units here in the Salina area? And his answer was, help us get a store like this in Salina. And I want to thank Tim Rogers and I want to thank Larry Powell on our staff for working together with the folks in Fort Riley and the folks here at the Great Plains Training Center to get us to this point. And it's been a real partnership and team effort, and I just want to publicly make sure we thank them. The other point I want to make in regards to the military, this past Saturday was a ribbon cutting for Building 412 as it's transferred over and involved in activities of the Great Plains Training Center. Two-star general approached me as soon as I got out of the car, and he said, "Here's what I was told earlier today." He said, "I was told that a military man walked into La Casita on Friday and was given a 10% discount because he was in a uniform. His wife told him at the end of the day, stop at Imperial Gardens on the way home, and when he walked in wearing his military uniform, he was given a 10% discount." I have found out since then that Lowe's, Long MacArthur, and Timberline Steakhouse are among many in the community who have decided to provide discounts to military folks, and we just thank those businesses and all the other ones that I didn't mention, and we hope that we can encourage more of that activity in recognition of the support of these folks.
Thank you. That's interesting.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. On to
Mayor, at this point in time, I need to make a motion that we add under administration item 8.4, covenants running with the land by Genesis Health Club, LLC, for the benefits of the city of Salina relating to building code compliances.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we add item 8.4 pertaining to Genesis Health Club. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Now moving on to development business.
Item 7.1, second reading ordinance number 10-10,564, adopting the comprehensive plan.
Mr. Andrew, do you have anything else to say on this?
Hopefully, do you have at your places there a letter from Mr. Fowler, the county commission, and that just echoes their agreement that their comprehensive plan is consistent with ours in terms of the urban service area, and that they are agreeable to enforcing our future land use plan in that urban service area. So we've got that as their confirmation.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this? See none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mayor, I move that we adopt on second reading ordinance number 10-10564, adopting the new comprehensive plan for the city of Salina and the surrounding unincorporated area.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10564. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Arbkey?
Aye.
Commissioner Jennings?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Mayor Peck?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to administration.
Item 8.1, first reading ordinance number 10-10,564, amending Chapter 8, Article 3, Division 1, Section 8-171 of the Salina Code, pertaining to definitions, and Division 2, Section 8-172.1, pertaining to building contractor licenses.
Mr. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Bringing this to your attention, this proposed code change in response to requests we've had from several members of the public, including the development community and building owners, requesting clarification to one of our items in Chapter 8 of the Salina Code. This concerns solid fuel burning devices. There are many members of the development community and building owners that have been confused by our current wording of this ordinance, and we are bringing this proposed change to you in an effort to clarify. This is a staff-initiated proposed change, hopefully to provide better customer service and clarification to those who utilize this code. The background is that solid fuel burning devices fall into two large general categories. The first category being factory-built appliances. These would be listed appliances, UL listed by nationally recognized testing agencies that are installed, repaired, and replaced by licensed mechanical contractors. The other category of solid fuel burning appliances would be the site-built devices. These would be masonry, fireplaces, stoves, the hearths, chimneys, etc. associated with those. Currently, our code requires that all solid fuel burning appliances be treated the same, and that's very confusing because they all require a licensed mechanical contractor to install, replace, or repair these. A licensed mechanical contractor is perfectly appropriate for the first category, the factory-built devices, but it's not appropriate for the second category, the site-built masonry devices. Two relatively small changes would satisfy this. The first is in the definition section. The definition for solid fuel appliance installation would be changed. The last sentence would indicate that these installations shall be limited to listed factory-built appliances. The second change would be to our chart, which indicates which type of building contractor can do specific categories of work. And under the specialty masonry contractor, language would be added to include the installation, repair, and replacement of masonry fireplaces, hearths, and chimneys. If we incorporate those two changes, I believe we would succeed in providing the clarification that is desired. And if the Commission would require any additional clarification or would like to ask any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions of staff? So I was looking at this and I was curious, and I don't know how the whole, it seems confusing to me to even look up anything in this, but so they just kind of lump in retaining walls with the other masonry products that really are more related to fireplaces, hearths, and chimneys.
Well, currently, specialty masonry contractors are permitted to make stone, brick, and block retaining walls, block walls, etc., and do block veneer. But we're adding to that the additional language.
Okay, I got you. Out of curiosity, for a permitted wall, what is the height of that?
It depends on the nature of the wall and the amount of surcharge, or if there is. The easy answer is if it's 4 feet or less without surcharge for a retaining wall, you don't need a permit.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring this back to the Commission.
Mayor, I move that we pass ordinance number 10-10565 on first reading, amending Chapter 8, Article 3 of the Salina Code.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10565. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0.
Item 8.2, Salina Economic Development Incentives Council. Sub-item 8.2A, Resolution Number 10-6764, clarifying the role of the SEDIC. Sub-item 8.2B, authorize staff to solicit proposal for a comprehensive targeted industry cluster study.
Mr. Gage.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As the clerk mentioned, you have two items here with two separate actions related to them. The first item relating to the SEDIC, I'll cover initially. And as you are already aware, in 2004, there was a sales tax that provided a portion of the proceeds for economic development purposes. And about a year after that, the SEDIC committee was formed, and the role at the time was to provide certain recommendation regarding certain aspects of economic development, but primarily to deal with requests for funding from the sales tax for economic development purposes. And then that was, the allotment was technically modified with the most recent sales tax when the sales tax increment went up to reflect, in essence, the same dollars each year. What we looked at is we looked at their role, and typically you look at the things that a group can do with those funds and the sales tax dollars, and we're looking at research and analysis, marketing, direct recruitment, relocation, training equipment, and so forth. And I'll talk about those a little bit more later, but kind of going back to the role of the SEDIC. The SEDIC in their role was sort of limited. For example, there were certain things like certain downtown funding items and some other items that did not go through that group. And we really felt that we should clarify the role of that group, and that they should be, in essence, the committee that recommends regarding policy or other aspects of all related economic development items. It didn't make sense to kind of limit them in some way. It just wasn't something that was thought about initially. So what this would do is it would add to their role those particular aspects that they would make sure and, in essence, provide advisory recommendations on. The second part has to do with, again, the use of the sales tax proceeds, and I mentioned some of those. And we currently, in the resolution, permit training, equipment, site development, facility construction, or expansion, but we don't include things such as the direct recruitment and marketing and research analysis, and site acquisition. And so, and the thinking is that whether or not in the future we'd actually want to utilize those funds for something like this, it would make sense to have the opportunity to do that if there was a certain opportunity in front of us. The discretion of all that still falls with the City Commission because, again, the role of the SEDIC is just advisory. So you still have full discretion to do that. And so what this, in essence, does is gives you more flexibility as well as that board to help provide a recommendation on those types of things. So when we looked at that, we added the categories of medical and bioscience to the primary business types. Job retention as a qualified purpose for grant funding. We recognize that job retention is always a difficult one because you really need to look at what's the future if you retain jobs. Is it for a year or two, or is it long term? And again, you'd look at any situation from an in-depth perspective before you would make a decision. We added the inclusion of research, analysis, feasibility studies related to recruitment, marketing, development, demand, and site evaluation as qualified for sales tax funding. And also facility acquisition, business relocation, and infrastructure is qualified. The rest of the resolution is identical. There aren't any changes recommended at this time. And again, the full authority still falls back with the City Commission. It's just if you have one of those types of requests, rather than the staff saying, "Well, it's strictly 100%, we can't do that," or possibly bringing at that time a request to you to change it based on an on-demand situation, it really opens up your opportunities and options. Item B deals more with a specific purchase and project in mind. And when you look into your Salina Economic Development Strategic Plan, it provides for the feasibility and market study for targeted industries. In essence, really targeting our strategies and not just the types, because there are more types than most would think. There are hundreds of types of industries, and trying to match those up with our strengths and or looking at our weaknesses as part of that as a community. But what a project like this would do would not only have an outside party do that, it would also help us with looking at our structure. Are there any weaknesses in our structure we should change? Sort of a sidebar thing. It would assist us with the marketing directly to those types. That's the important thing. It's linking that up. And implementation strategies and other guidelines. And we really felt this is something that's needed to happen. It's been in the plan a long time. I think initially when it was put in the plan, it was expected to maybe be an item in the $10,000 or $15,000 range. And when we started looking at it and looked at other cities who are doing this, we found it was much more expensive, as probably everything else is. It was much more expensive than what we had initially thought it would be. So with that, talked to Dennis Laver with the Chamber of Commerce. In the Chamber, he's committed that they would provide up to 50% of the project costs with a reimbursement over a couple of years to allow them the cash flow ability to reimburse us back. And if you wanted to go forward with this, they would formalize that. We'd formalize it by letter of agreement. If you want to move forward with this, what we would do is a qualification-based selection method. And in essence, you identify the folks who provide that service. There are a lot of folks in the private sector that do it. There are some universities that do it, and that may actually be less costly than a private sector consultant. What we'd really look for is who's really good at it based on their experience, so that we know we're not just going through the motions. We're getting a product we can use, and that'll actually help us because this is something we really need. So in essence, we'd go through that requesting, we'd identify the folks, we'd request for them to submit to us their qualification statements, and at that stage, depending on the amount of interest, we could add in some layers of review, but we could either, if like one really stands out from the other, we could commence negotiation. We could ask for price proposals as well, but initially we would simply say, who are those that are truly qualified to do this? How many are left in that list at that point in time? Could be 2 or 3, could be 8 or 10. It's possible. So once we get their interest, we'll know and can review that, and we can work from there. When we look at the 2 items from the fiscal perspective, item A doesn't have any impact at this point. It's just a discretionary decision type item dealing with the SEDIC's role and the use of the funds. Item B for the comprehensive targeted industry study obviously has a direct cost, and we've estimated that could be as high as $80,000. And when we looked at the alternative and the recommendation, if you went with that, we'd say if you do authorize it, an amount not to exceed $80,000. This is again looking at what other communities have done. A lot of the scopes have been different, so our scope has a lot to do with that. We want to make sure our scope is for what we really need and not anything extra. I think that's real important. So we have the 2 items in front of you. Item A regarding the SEDIC and the resolution. We have the 3 options there. Approve the resolution as it's proposed, or with any amendments you might have, or not approve it at this time. And then item B for the comprehensive targeted industry cluster study to utilize a qualifications-based selection method to move forward with that and authorize that, an amount not to exceed $80,000 to be paid specifically from the economic development portion of our sales tax. That's where money would be available, with subject to the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce formally agreeing to reimburse the city for 50% of the total project cost over a period not to exceed 2 years. Obviously, the other option would be not to move forward with that at this time. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have on either of the 2 items.
Questions of staff?
Well, the targeted industry cluster study, I guess, will the direction be given to them based upon what we list as our primary business types? Or should we wait to amend the primary business types until we get the result of the study?
Yeah, we won't limit them in any way. So what we would actually rely on them, they would actually look at our community and look at what we currently have as well as the characteristics of the community. And they would identify what they believe based on our strengths and opportunities are here, what those business types would be for us. So we wouldn't limit them and say, well, here are like certain primary, just work from this list. We wouldn't do that at all. I think we want to give them the full discretion to try to match up for us rather than try to do their work for them.
So after we get that study back, if it passes, we may come back and modify this again to change the primary business types to be more in conformance with whatever the results.
Oh, yeah, what's listed in the strategic plan? Absolutely. Yeah, I think we would. And again, let me add, I did forgot to do that. Dennis Laver with the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce is also here if you have a question for him.
Yeah, I like the targeted business study personally. What I need to hear a little bit more on is the inclusion of job retention into a use for grant funds. To me, that seems like a pretty big Pandora's box of how do you even measure it, and is somebody just really on short-term cash flow needs, or are we going to help out with something that's not sustainable in the first place? And so out of anything that's presented here, that's definitely the item that I'm just not in favor of, and I'd like to hear a little bit more to make sure that that's kind of the appropriate modification that I'd want to see to this.
Yeah, we had the same conversation, and when I say we, the kind of the staff team that deals with this is myself and of course Dennis Laver and Tim Rogers, the Airport Authority, and Rita Deister. And we when we talked about this, that was the main issue. And because you're correct, there are times when there's a retention issue where, all you're doing is maybe extending the time frame for which you're going to lose the jobs in your community, and that's not money well spent. And then there may be opportunities in which you really do have an opportunity there where they have a game plan in place and you're just one piece of it, maybe, and there'd have to be other pieces, and it looks like there's a future there. I would tell you that the only way we would even recommend to the SEDIC or the commission that you'd expend for job retention is if, in fact, there's a plan that's put in front of us that we're confident will lead to the future operations and not simply reduce or extend the time frame a few months or something like that. But it will be case by case and situational. So
It'd almost have to be willingness of the corporation, their business entity, to open their books.
possibly
Show you all their expenses, show you their profitability or not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that could be what you're giving money to. And is that something that is even a capability? I mean, that almost be a prerequisite to even be considered. Is it is based on bottom line performance, and then somehow you got to go back and ensure that a corporation is actively trying to reduce efficiencies and lower cost and strategically buy, and it gets to be a really sticky wicket, I think.
Mhm.
Don't we currently have, isn't, not job, what do I want to say, company expansion, isn't expansion already included in that? So expansion, wouldn't that kind of go hand in hand with the retention as well?
Not necessarily. Retention would be a situation which, let's say you have a company here that has a couple hundred jobs, and all of a sudden we hear, or through discussions, however it might be, that they plan on eliminating maybe a fourth of them, maybe half of them, maybe all of them, could be. We've been fortunate that we haven't had that big layoff that a lot of communities have. I mean, Hawker Beechcraft is the closest thing, and it's a big layoff, but not the all at once, hundreds of jobs all at once just gone, because that's a phased deal that gives us time to hopefully replenish jobs. So you get that scenario and you say, okay, and they say, well, we might consider staying if the city would contribute funds from the SCDIC. And I 100% concur with Commissioner Jennings. I think you would have to look much deeper there than you probably do with anything else, because you have to be convinced that your dollars, first of all, your dollars aren't going to make the total difference. The dollars we're talking about aren't enough to make the decision for them by themselves, with just that factor. So you'd have to be convinced that all the other factors that are involved would lead them to being able to stay. Honestly, I doubt it would be used much. In all honesty, I really don't think that it would. The closest situation scenario that I can think of in the region of a retention, a really aggressive actually retention approach, was in Hutchinson. I don't know, 3 years ago. I can't remember the name of the company.
In the case of Topeka, a year and a half ago, they made a very aggressive approach as related to the Goodyear facility. And then the example that Jason's thinking of in Hutchinson, probably the best examples. And Commissioner Jennings, you're right. It's kind of the $64,000 question there. We know since the recession hit, companies with the Salina presence that eliminated jobs in other parts of the country, and they shifted that work here to the community. They did that because of productivity gains and efficiencies, central location in the United States. Sometimes what triggers that advantage, let's shut down the facility in Reading, Pennsylvania. Let's close the facility in Florence, Alabama. Let's move it up there, is because, they had newer, better equipment that provides more productivity. Purely, if you look at it from a Salina perspective, they bought a new piece of equipment, but it's not adding any new jobs. It's protecting the jobs. So it'll take a very careful approach just to avoid, as you said, the Pandora's box with that. But I think when you get into working with those folks and really understand their issues, we won't come to you unless we're confident that it's a situation where it's appropriate.
Yeah, if that's something the commission as a whole is not comfortable with, you could, but you're comfortable with everything else, you could approve it with the amendment that phrase comes out. Mm-hmm. So we could do it however you'd like.
If I can touch on and give an example as it relates to the whole purpose of an industry cluster analysis, I think of the coming InBAF facility of Manhattan. And as businesses trail that facility, not every business is going to want to locate in Manhattan. Not every business, and Manhattan doesn't want every business trailing to locate with them. In a very broad sense, the businesses that will trail the InBAF facility fall under one of two categories: research or commercialization. Underneath each of those, it could be dealing with plants, it could be dealing with humans, or it could be dealing with animals. And it gets you into narrow niches. And let's say that this process will give us some guidance to say, here's the niche where Salina can prosper. Gosh, you've got a university presence here in the community. You've got X, Y, and Z that fit. That becomes valuable information for us to come back and then build our advantage. If it comes back and says, well, in this particular niche, they need 80-acre lots that are rail served, then we know where to aim, as opposed to if they come back and say 20-acre lots that are not rail served. And it allows us to be much more strategic, much better users of our money as we make decisions where we can win when we go forward.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, I'll accept a motion. Two separate motions, I suppose.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion as it applies to item A, the modification of the SEDIC resolution number 106764, amended to remove the inclusion of job retention as a qualified purpose for grant funding. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that down the road, how you balance big business corporation versus small few person businesses and those types of things over the community. So I would make a motion that we approve that resolution with that amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number 10-6764 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0.
And on item B, I would approve that we authorize staff to solicit proposals using qualification-based selection method for a comprehensive targeted industry cluster in the amount not to exceed $80,000 to be paid from the economic development portion of the special sales tax and subject to the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce formally agreeing to reimburse the city for 50% of the total project costs.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we authorize staff to solicit proposals for a targeted industry cluster study paid for through the economic development portion of the special sales tax and also with a 50% funding from the chamber. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0.
Item 8.3, first reading ordinance number 10-10,566, amending Chapter 8, Article 2, Sections 8-162 through 8-164 of the Salina Code pertaining to the Building Advisory Board.
Mr. Hobby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and Commissioners, we have before you three minor changes to our Building Advisory Board section of the City Code. We have in the past year have completed the review of the building codes for the new year. And last week of October of this month, next month, we will have a new set of building codes, the 2006 building code and residential code, as well as uniform codes. We also went through the process to make sure that we had no interferences and no conflicts between the International Fire Code and the International Building Code. Roger Williams, the fire marshal, sat in on several of the subcommittee meetings and went through the same process with us through the building codes and suggested that there be some changes in the International Fire Code. So this year we took to the Building Advisory Board the request that the Building Advisory Board install or submit a subcommittee of people in the community as well as board members to set on a subcommittee to review the International Fire Code, allowing that there be no inconsistencies then between the International Building Code and the International Fire Code. The system worked very well. What we found out in the past that the fire codes were brought to the City Commission directly. They did not actually go through the Building Advisory Board. So any changes in the fire codes or any changes in the building codes, there may have been some type of inconsistency in the past. We wanted to eliminate that this year, and it worked very well with our system. So the first change is actually asking you to allow the Building Advisory Board to change their regulations to look at all the model codes, all the international codes, all the uniform codes, any model code that we wish to adopt here in the city, have a subcommittee process set up as well as review by the Building Advisory Board. The next minor change is basically a clarification saying that we would like to have a Kansas licensed or certified architects, engineers, and realtors, as well as those people who are licensed from the city of Salina as master and journeyman to be on that board. We also would like to clarify the length of term. So as a member would come on the board, be appointed to fill an unexpired term, he would not be, he would be allowed, or they would be allowed to carry on 2 full terms after that. These seem to be minor changes with our system, and the Building Advisory Board has reviewed the system and our changes and suggestions and recommends to you that we carry this on through. And we ask today for your approval of this ordinance. Stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Hobby? Any public comment? Bring this back to the commission.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number 10-566, amending Chapter 8, Article 2, Section 8-162 through 8-164 of the Salina Building Code pertaining to the Building Advisory Board.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 10-10566. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Then moving on to 8.4.
Item 8.4, covenants running with the land by Southview Plaza of Salina, LLC, doing business as Genesis Health Clubs.
Thank you. Mr. Bingston.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. The document before you relates to code compliance matters for what is more commonly known as the Genesis Health Club development. There are others that can speak better than I to the overall status of the project, but the document before you, headed Covenants Running with the Land, is a document that you can, I think of as Paul had suggested, as a substitute for the no-build easements that are being sought by the owner-developer in relation to that project. It has to do with the Uniform Building Code matter in terms of distances between the building and other buildings on adjoining properties. The covenants set out the circumstances as they exist presently, and the rationale behind this approach of utilizing these covenants for a period of time as substitutes for those no-build easements. The key language, I think, for your consideration is, as you look there at Section 1 on page 2, the actual covenant, where you will see that we have 2 key events that would relate to either obtaining the no-build easements or transitioning to what we've referred to as a code-compliant alternative construction. It's anticipated that that alternative construction process would involve approximately 90 days in order to construct. So you'll see there that either well, maybe look at it this way. There is a set deadline of December 20th, 2010, essentially 90 days out, during which presumably the developer would seek to obtain the no-build easements. The other event that could occur is if there were to be a building permit issued for construction of a structure to be located within 60 feet of any point of the perimeter walls of the facility. That's another triggering event that would require the necessity of either having the no-build easements or transitioning to this alternative construction approach. So, as you can see, those are the two key dates, and the earlier of those is what triggers either having to have the easements or transitioning to the alternative approach. The security for that, to protect the public interest, is in the form of a letter of credit relating to the anticipated cost of taking that alternative approach. I've been in discussions, in fact, just as a matter of a few minutes ago, with the lending institution in Wichita that will be issuing that letter of credit. And I hope after we speak, I'll be able to go upstairs and see that it has been delivered, or at least a signed copy, electronically sent to us. That, he has assured me, will be for a term of 1 year. So it will readily cover the time periods that we're now concerned about. So with that, I'll ask if you have any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Bingston or staff?
1 year from today's date.
That's my understanding. I'll know for sure in a moment, but just so you know, related to the letter of credit, it provides in the document that our receipt of the letter of credit is a condition precedent to our acceptance of the covenant. So before asking the mayor to, if you decide to go ahead with this concept, before executing it, we would be sure to have the proof that we have the letter of credit in hand.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
I have a comment to make.
Oh, excuse me, Tom.
I am very unhappy with the Genesis clubs. They've known since October of last year that they needed to get these building easements from AutoZone and 305. As far as I can tell, they've done absolutely nothing. I haven't heard from USDO 305 that they've even considered this at their board meetings, and I'm very reticent to even approve this. And if it weren't for the customers that already paid their money, Salina citizens, I would vote no on this. So I think he's very fortunate that we're going to even consider this motion today before the City Commission.
Thank you. Is there any further comments? Well, a comment I would have, obviously there's always two sides to every story here, but I do appreciate the investment that Genesis is making in our community. Certainly a significant improvement for the land that they are placing their facility on. And at the same time, I know that our staff has worked diligently with them to do all we can to accommodate some hiccups that probably could have been taken care of up front. So hopefully the rest of this construction goes smoothly, and I feel confident Genesis will work well with our staff and make sure everything gets taken care of. So with that, accept a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve and authorize you to sign these covenants running with the land by Southview Plaza of Salina LLC, DBA Genesis Health Clubs for the benefit of the city of Salina, Kansas.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that I sign covenants running with the land by Southview Plaza of Salina LLC, doing business as Genesis Health Clubs for the benefit of the city of Salina, Kansas. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Do you know what the executive session might be related to?
It's personnel in nature, but Mayor, it's not timely, and I think given our need to address an unrelated development issue, we can put that off into another date and let you go home a little bit early.
I'm all for that. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We're adjourned.